In today's podcast, I want us to take a look at the book of Lamentations, but I want to do this kind of in a different way. When I'm looking at the book of Lamentations, I'd like to focus a little bit more on the poetic elements in the way that it's written because it's very unique. It's somewhat of an alphabet book. It's actually four different alphabet books that are kind of put together. And so I'd like to kind of share that with you a little bit and also talk a little bit about the authorship. But before we get to that, I'd like to just draw just a few things out of the devotions that I've written about Lamentations. We believe Lamentations was written by Jeremiah with a whole lot of help from Baruch. And it could be that Baruch was really mostly responsible for the writings following conversations he had with Jeremiah, which is a little different than being Jeremiah's scribe like Baruch was for the other writings that were attributed to Jeremiah. I want to read just a little bit from page 312. This is the devotional that I wrote for June 27th. I want to read just a couple of paragraphs from that. Lamentations is written in literary styles that make use of poetic elements. The poetry contained is written as if Jerusalem and the temple have died. The scattered peoples of Israel and Judah are represented as a woman who feels betrayed and alone, although somewhat responsible for the consequences. There seems to be a little disconnect with reality as she, the people of Israel and Judah, takes little responsibility. Israel and Judah took advantage of the nations around them and also mistreated their own citizens. In their lamenting, they are seeing their past deeds through rosy lenses. So even though Lamentations is written kind of like a mourning our loss, mourning is part of the human experience. And mourning is more than just mourning the death of someone, but it's the loss of status, could be loss of a job, could be loss of connections, loss of a church. There's lots of reasons where we might actually mourn a loss other than the loss of a person. And so in this case, they are mourning the loss of Jerusalem and the temple. The kingdom of Judah and kingdom of Israel have been wiped out, captured, carried off. Even the kingdom of Judah carried off into Babylon. And so they're mourning their losses, but they're still looking at things through rosy glasses and rosy lenses, and they're not really taking responsibility for the part that they played in the way they mistreated. It keeps going back to the whole reason Jesus had to come was to clarify, hey, people, you're living by rules. You're not living by what God calls of you to do. Next week, I'm doing a podcast on the church, but specifically affirming churches that accept and affirm LGBTQ people as people that are as God intended them to be through no choice of their own. But I'm going to be addressing that in a way where, okay, how do these affirming churches still sometimes get things wrong? And so that's going to be a subject of a podcast coming up, I believe next Monday's podcast, if I'm on schedule, or the early part of next week. But the kingdoms of Israel, the kingdoms of Judah, and the Israelites, even Abraham and Lot, and all of our ancient forefathers in our religious stories still got things wrong because they focused on following rules and checklists to make sure they're doing things just right. And they were very quick to chastise people who fell outside the lines or did not follow the list of things as they had them identified. And so people were still getting it wrong. The Israelites and that were part of the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah still treated people around them poorly. They go in and slaughter whole communities because they said God gave them that land and God told them to do that. Well, no, that's not the way God works, and so that's just not the way it is. And so um, when we look at Lamentations, they've lost everything. They're feeling sorry for themselves, but even in their lamenting, they're not taking responsibility for what they were doing wrong, because they still held tight to their beliefs that they're better than everyone else and they were right and everybody else was wrong, and they weren't loving and kind and inclusive. And so that's really what it is. Okay, so I want to get back to the actual uh, the 4 chapters. I believe Lamentations is only 4 chapters, and chapters 1, 2, and 4 are alike in that they are alphabet books. And chapter 3 is also an alphabet book, but it's a little more complex. The first, second, and fourth chapter of Lamentations have exactly 22 verses. There were 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and each verse started with the next letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Well, I got into editing this episode and I had put on the microphone that wasn't in charge and it went dead halfway through. And so I had all this video with no sound. So I'm going to back up just a little bit and go forward. Okay, so when we're looking at the book of Lamentations, I really like it for its poetic value, in addition to being a book of the Bible. Chapters 1, 2, and 4 are basically alphabet books, with each verse being a new page in the book if you wanted to draw a picture to go with it. There are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and so chapters 1, 2, and 4 each have 22 verses, and they are the 20, and each verse starts with the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Now, obviously, we're reading whatever language you're reading in, whether you're reading in English, although I've got my dad's Spanish Bible out here, the last one that he got in 2011, and I was looking through it yesterday and looking at the markings he made. I even found notes for a sermon that he made. It's got a date on it. His sermon notes usually were the scripture and 3 points, and that was it. A little note like that, which is good. It means he didn't have to read his sermons. But anyway, so whatever language you're reading it in, you're not reading it in Hebrew. So the whole idea of these poetic elements that are embedded in the writing of Lamentations, like works of poetry, poems, is kind of lost on us unless we understand how it was written. Now, chapter 3 of Lamentations is even more special because it has 66 verses that is grouped in groups of 3 verses. So there are 22 groups of 3 verses for a total of 66 verses. And each group of 3 verses started with each of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So chapter 3 is an even more sophisticated alphabet book to kind of go through and give this story of grief, which is human. It's okay. And we are expected to grieve when we have loss, but we're also expected to have responsibility for any of our losses that we had a part in. If you are responsible, or if part of your grief is a consequence from something you did, well, then you just have to uh, own up to that as well. Unlike the people of Israel and Judah, that they are depicting as um, the the wife who has lost everything, and uh, not looking at what her part was in that. Not quite sure why they talk about the people as if they're a woman. It probably was cultural in the way they thought of male and female roles. We could deconstruct that and perhaps even be offended by it, but let's just push that to the side and look for the meat of what it's telling us here, and not looking at, they're talking about a wife. It's a person. Male or female is not relevant in the story if we can push that to the side, because at the time these were written, we know their culture and how they believed, and we know the fallacies of their beliefs. But if we can divorce ourselves from that and just focus on the meat of what's going on here. So while there are things for us to pull from it, acknowledging that grief is a normal human emotion and it's okay. And if we have any responsibility, if what we lost is due to our own consequences of things we did, that perhaps, if we had to do it all over again, we would do something different, because that would set off things in a different way. But it's important to know and understand that we can't do anything about the past. Whether you're talking about something that happened 5 minutes ago, or something that happened 2 days ago, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, you can't do anything about the past. And at some level, you can't dwell on that. You can't beat yourself up. You have to live in the present and the future, because we can't do anything about the past. The only thing we can do is we can learn from the past and don't make the same mistakes again. So while we do have things we can pick up and learn and discuss from Lamentations, for this podcast, I chose to focus on something that's unique about the book of Lamentations, and I give Baruch credit for that, putting in the poetic elements that make it truly unique. Now, it's lost on us in reading, in whether you're reading it in Spanish or English or what other language. That part kind of gets lost on us. But I think it's kind of cool to know that while someone was telling the story, and sometimes when you're reading the prophets and the minor prophets, it gets really monotonous and boring, because they're warning the people mess up, the people suffer consequences. A lot of people, they had a fear of God, like afraid, not a fear meaning respect. So they got things really wrong. We still get things wrong today as well, but it's kind of nice to just kind of look at this book and say, someone was very creative, and someone worked poetic elements into, while presenting us with this information or these truths, but doing it in an alphabetical way. And I don't know if anyone could take one of these chapters, either chapter 1, 2, or 4, or even chapter 3, and illustrate an alphabet book. That would be really cool. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this type of conversation, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Have a good rest of your week.